Hello and hey, doing messing around with Path of Exile, this time going over a potential 3.15 Expedition League starter build in the exciting Summon Reaper Necromancer. As a huge disclaimer from the jump, even after patch notes, we aren't getting to know a lot of things about this ultimate minion until we get our hands on them. The 2020 gem is not likely to share how much damage it's going to do. We don't know if it has a pecking order of the AI in which minions it could consume first, or if it's totally random. Is it based on proximity to the Reaper? Do different minions empower it differently? We technically don't know the answer to any of those questions I just proposed, but what I do know is this long-legged diva looks really cool, and minions should be really strong, comparatively, as a starter in this nerf-heavy league. There are a different number of options that we can choose to both level with and end up with in the endgame. My pick will probably end up being with Physical Impale Skeletons as the starter, possibly transitioning to Conversion, Triad Grip, +3 Minion Elder Shaper Helm with the Soul Rest Staff nonsense after I get a couple dozen Exalts. So it's super flexible because the core build of minions is roughly the same, almost to a boring sense. But that means that it's tested and proven. Yes, the campaign will take longer with all the changes, but there's no doubt that it will pick up steam as it normally does, especially after the second lab. If you're just interested in the Summon Reaper, then this gem, being new, is a risk. However, summoners will remain strong in 3.15 compared to the average skill. So even if you don't end up liking the melee confined Reaper, there are plenty of easy switches for you to jump off to. SRS, the Dead Reckoning Skeleton Mages, just a generic Spectre build. I mean, that's sort of the lame but very consistent part about playing minions. The build is always similar, so it always works. The reason I'm not heralding the aforementioned Soul Rest Staff is that it's quite rare and will be contentious at the start of this league. It looks really good for Summon Reaper build, and it has, the clear, it has the minions you don't temporarily mind losing, it has a really strong build without the ultimate minion being added to it, so it makes perfect sense that it would draw many more eyes than normal for starters. I've seen too much hype around Summon Reaper for this to be an attainable item for that many people the first couple days. And that's why I want to avoid this. If you typically don't finish the campaign in under 5 to 6 hours, and not talking about this league, then I think that you'll be just priced out of the staff, as a starter build. It's rare, but I do think it's among the best options for this skill. So if you don't mind, you just want to play and you don't mind when you get it, feel free to go for that. I'm just looking to give the most people something to play with if they can't or don't want to grab that expensive or rare staff. But with all that out of the way, we can finally talk about the build I am actually proposing. The Physical Impale Skeletons with, of course, Summon Reaper. These guys have been amazing forever. The single target for Vol Summon Skeletons has been, and even after all the nerfs that hit this patch, it's still going to be great. It's always the easiest million DPS in the game, hands down. You don't need to wear any gear to hit 7 figures. I mean, just a tabula to hold the gems that does it. Being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the tree. Like I said, pretty standard core to the tree. There isn't a lot of getting cute to the base passive tree. Snag Enduring Bond first, then Lord of the Dead. I like making my way over to Sacrifice, but will always head up to Fearsome Force and Death Attunement. Your preference on the order, just think that area of effect will be really important for Summon Reaper, especially the sweeping dash attack that we kind of control. And from there, we will grab as much life as we feel like we need from these nodes and add the damage ones when we think that we don't need the immediate life. It just depends on what gear drops for you, it depends on how the build feels for you, and don't be afraid to adapt. But if you're deferring to me, I lean heavily into softcore, and I'm not afraid to corpse run a boss with the short respawn if my resists aren't good enough in the campaign. After F5 and there's a penalty, I'm not as likely to do that, but running around like a chicken with my head cut off sure seems slower than just doing all the damage I can without staying in the middle of the obviously super telegraphed attacks. I'm not afraid to fall in combat because slash deaths is more of an ego thing when it comes to softcore. For Ascendancies, we want to of course speed run to Unnatural Strength. We start with Mindless Aggression, go to Unnatural Strength. The other 3 or 4 options I think I might want to try are Bone Barrier, because level 20 Bone Armor both does not consume a slot for your guard skill. It gives you, basically 10 additional physical damage reduction and 20% more maximum life for your minions, which are going to be way less healthy this particular league. So that was good. Bone Armor does give you immunity to bleed, as far as I'm aware. I don't think it got touched in this patch, so that's one of the few options to get that. That's why I think it's more important in this league. And of course, Mistress of Sacrifice, giving your offering skills, giving you those block chance if you go for Bone Offering, and then just a little bit of quality of life for Flesh Offering. Not as important if you aren't going for that. I think other available options this league, Plague Bringer, if it is super important to get area effect on the Summon Reaper, this is going to be a node that is a no-brainer. You want to have 30% increase AoE for sure. And also, if you just don't want to care about resistances, Commander of Darkness always works, and you get increased damage off of that as well. It's a little less specific, just a general good node. It's not a bad node in almost any case, so go for that if you want. But this is the 4 I'm going for. Mindless Aggression, Unnatural Strength, and either Bone Barrier or Mistress of Sacrifice 3rd, and the other one 4th. Slide on over the skills, first taking a look at our damage numbers, if you can see them. They're super low. I have nothing checked off, and the appropriate nerfs already applied via custom flasks and down-leveled skill gems. This is something that some people aren't the biggest fans of with my builds and guides. I want to show you the least that you can expect for damage numbers. The worst thing that I want to do is give you false expectations for a build, so I don't. Let's explain what we got. Vol summon skeletons. It's a no-brainer for using skeletons. The Vol version is just crazy more damage in all cases. And starting with minion damage as our first support, we move down to 39%, and the downside has been applied to this flask. Melee physical damage again, downside applied to that flask. It is among the highest more multipliers remaining in the game, and the downside doesn't hit minions quite as hard, and we have a ton of them, so they're hitting constantly. Those, of course, are reasonable gems, and this is where it gets a little bit weird. Fortify is representing Brutality. Brutality is all the way down from 40 in 3.14 to 30 as a level 1 gem, I should say, before we only get to 35% as a level 20 gem in 3.15. So if you're converting damage, obviously don't use that, and then don't use Fortify either, but that's what we're going to choose for this case. And Impale, luckily, we can get the proper Impale chance and close enough on the Impale effect. The only thing we can't do with that is down level the more multiplier, but as you've seen, I have a separate flask just for that gem to get us to the right place. Predator is also wonky, unfortunately. The base damage is too high, but when I click the signal prey damage, it's bang on, so we'll go ahead and click that now. It helps a lot. Then we have the option slots of Feeding Frenzy and Melee Slash. They're here because Clear is not going to be the Summon Reaper's strong suit. Skeletons are interesting in that you summon 4 of them at once, so it doesn't hurt as bad as to summon them as most packs. Have some of them eaten by your Reapers or the enemies, and with our reduced movement speed, they can kind of keep up when given Feeding Frenzy for that little dash they get. They're also 1 blue and 1 red because you'd want to switch out our Brutality or Elemental damage with attacks if you're converting to Melee Slash, because there is no downside other than opportunity cost for single target in that case. And Predator gives such a small bonus without Signal Prey that dashing skeletons to give Feeding Frenzy or whatever else you have is a solid replacement. But hey, I know you aren't here for skeletons, you're here for Summon Reaper. Personally, I think it will be the best to get this guy to some ridiculous mid-level 30s gem, but I can't prove that right now. So if you get a tabula and just want to see what it has, I think it would look something like this. As a physical build, melee fizz damage, Impale, Brutality, Minion damage. I don't know how much health he has, but eating our other minions means he's got a chance to have a lower max than most and still be fine. Like, do we want multi-strike? I mean, obviously not if it locks them in a weird animation, or if it doesn't play nice with our casted attack, but as a pure melee that can be supported by multi-strike, it's usually a no-brainer. But even just an Empower in here as well. I think optimally, like I was saying, we get into a +3 helm that's actually a 6-link, gives you even more options for your supplementary minions, and minions just scale really well with levels, so I don't see how it could be bad. In which case, if still physical, Impale, but if not, obviously drop Brutality and Impale, and let's see how multi-strike performs, or if the Reaper just gets too clunky. Getting to our other slots, I am the world's 9th biggest Cyclone fan, so I really like Cyclone, Castwall, Channeling, Curse, plus Offering. It's one of my favorite ways to work in those abilities, and even though it doesn't give stun immunity anymore, you can move through enemies, so it's a flawed, phasing-like ability. Vulnerability, if you're physical, has the side effect of tapping into the Reaper's innate bleed chance, which I don't see quite as being more than a meme, but I'm happy to be wrong about that, because if it hits hard enough, it definitely won't be a meme. Clicking over to auras, they're pretty standard. Pride, Flesh and Stone, neither of which got touched, and if combats last longer on average, Pride will be closer to maximum effect more often, so one of the most copium buffs in the patch. Dread Banner knocks these boys up to 80% Impale, gives them some additional Impale effect and less accuracy for enemies. If we're doing our block route, we can't evade, but minions aren't restricted like that. Maim is up to you. It's a sizable chunk of your mana. Almost all mana multipliers were increased, so it might actually make a difference. The mana reduction nodes on the tree will inform this decision. but you have to decide if you think 10% increased damage taken is worth the roughly 5% mana you reduce when we're already so limited in that resource. Then, depending on how the Reaper chooses its consume targets, I'd like to run a Raise Zombie Summon Phantasm Feeding Frenzy setup. They will probably be pretty squishy with the Reaper getting their HP, but a bunch of extra minions in a Horde setup is great. Benefits the Bone Barrier Ascendancy node, plus they are a non-zero addition to damage and just doing a great job of giving the rest of the squad Feeding Frenzy buff. And of course, we need to talk about movement, which is slightly slapped with the patch notes. Flame Dash is the way to go with Cold Iron points, but Shield Charge would be the way to go with Wand and Shield, especially if you can sneak Fortify into that. But we need Desecrate and Convocation like most summoners, so we fill the build out with those. I'm tempted to tag all these with Life Tap, even with the 300% cost, just because the mana pool will be struggling compared to previous leagues. And that, of course, brings us to items. Cold Iron points are probably the play here, at least until you can get crazy Wand and a nice shield. 6 levels on something that is meant to be an ultimate minion should be insane. Herald of Agony used to be way too strong before they constantly nerfed it. Hopefully they forgot about all that and give us this league of a way too strong boy. So let's get a level like 35 Summon Reaper and see what that's about. Like stated throughout this build so far, an Elder Shaper influenced, I-83, 84 Helm is the goal. The +3 socketed minions, level X minion damage, and probably conversion to cold with Triad Grip like all the rest. Though you'd have to chain some gems to get the 4 green for your gloves, very obviously. I don't know what to expect for damage from this guy, which I've exhausted that statement at this point for sure, but just have a feeling that even a 5-link version of that helmet, as long as we have all these skeletons, it'll do just fine, at least until the higher levels of like 10-way Mavens and beyond. For all the other gear, life, resists, and if it can roll minion stats, go for those once you have those resists. Cluster Jewels, interesting questions arise. Do consumed minions count towards the life from death node? It makes that notable better if it's only a level I level 50 sort of jewel. We don't need a crazy medium jewel, which will go for much more this league. And how does Blessed Rebirth work? Can the Reaper consume those undamageable minions? You don't want to accidentally nerf the main attraction. So I also won't explicitly show this, but like renewal, if Summon Reaper does really big damage, that chance for double damage does become really nice. So it's hard to say exactly what we want from clusters at this point, but we know we probably want them. And that's about it from the skills and items. I wish we had more information going into the patch. They only showed footage from Act 4, interesting enough, in that promo, and only had it supported with minion damage and faster casting in the Aqueduct, then absolutely no supports in the Dried Lake. It still seemed like it was doing fine. So like many of you, I have high hopes. Nerfs don't feel great in the PvE game, but I can somewhat understand the sentiments behind it. I'm just trying to stay excited for all the new stuff, including this gem that I'm most excited about. So, as always, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Have a great league start. Be safe, guys.